we're not being prioritized like you are in these official Spotify editorial playlists, because you've now struck these direct deals, these licensing deals with the DSPs, where you will accept a lower royalty rate because they're going to juice up your plays. And so on a massive scale, this works beautifully for you because you're doing a big numbers game. But this is my concern for the rest of the music industry, especially independent artists who are not with Epidemic Sound, is now we are suffering the consequences of those actions because we are not being juiced up and prioritized because we don't want to accept a lower royalty rate from Spotify, but you're okay to do that. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I would love to.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Third edition is out now everywhere, all formats, audiobook, ebook, hardcover, however you like books, you can find it. Today, my guest is the CEO and founder of Epidemic Sound, Oscar Höglund. He's based in Sweden, and Epidemic Sound has been around 16 years. And you may not have heard of the company, the name Epidemic Sound, but you definitely have heard some of their music because they have now heard over 3 billion times every single day across YouTube and TikTok. Their music is. And so they have a very interesting, dare I call it, innovative. It's a unique model of how they are working with their artists and structuring their copyright and ownership. It's very different from how the music industry has worked up until this point. They work on a complete ownership model. They do have royalty splits. They have equity participation. I'll let him explain a little bit more of this, but essentially what they do is they, for a subscription fee, any creator, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, can go pay a subscription. They have access to the 250,000 songs that are on Epidemic Sound, and they can use their music in their videos, essentially royalty free, so they don't have to worry about copyright strikes or anything like that. And then those creators can still earn on those videos without having to share that revenue, or give up the revenue, I should say, to the music rights holders. Now, as you can imagine, I'm always looking out for the artists. I'm always looking out for how can artists make more money from their music. And I had some visceral gut reactions to a lot of what he brought up. I also brought up the fake artist scandal. This, of course, was how everybody noticed years ago. There were all of these fake artist profiles on Spotify. And a lot of times the music was lean back music, kind of functional music, sleep, deep focus, mood music, that kind of stuff. And these artists, they had fake profiles. Well, they had profiles with only a couple songs and AI generated artwork and all of that. And they weren't like real working artists, as the profile was created yesterday, the song was released today. And for some reason, it got added to all of these official Spotify editorial playlists and got millions of streams. And everyone's like, how is this possible? We talk about it. Epidemic Sound is a big reason for that. And I pressed him on it pretty hard. And credit to Oscar for hanging with me as I flung a lot of these questions at him. We got existential in some of the discussion of, is this good for the music industry? Is this good for artists? Are these good for artists who are not part of Epidemic's roster? And he brought up some interesting points. So I would encourage you to listen to the very end of this, where we really get into that discussion. And I brought up a few of the artists that are Epidemic artists who were interviewed by Liz Pelly for her book, Mood Machine, which kind of broke open this whole fake artist, ghost artist scandal with the perfect fit content, PFC content on Spotify. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to my interview on this show with Liz Pelly. We had her on a couple of months ago, or go read her book on it. And so some of the questions kind of came from that. But Epidemic is doing very innovative things in the industry. It's going to turn a lot of heads. It's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable and a lot of people angry, because it's challenging the status quo. And, I'll let you listen to this and decide for yourself what you feel about their model. Anyone that's listening from a performing rights organization, neighboring rights organization, probably a label or a publishing company is not going to be too thrilled with their model, but it is innovative and it needs to be understood of what's happening. We all know that the music industry is completely broken. So anyone that is offering a pathway forward, even if It is dramatically different from everything we understand. They are wildly successful at this, mind you. They're valued at over $1 billion as a company. And like I said, their videos get 3 million times a day. So there's a lot of value to this conversation. I think you're really going to appreciate it. You can find Epidemic Sound on their website. That's probably the best place, epidemicsound.com. You can find Oscar on LinkedIn. We'll link you to his profile if you'd like to connect deeper with him. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But right now, if you wouldn't mind, just pause this, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, however you're listening to this. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the follow button if you want more of these episodes in your feed. And then visit aristake.com and get on our email list. That's actually the best way to stay in touch with us. aristake.com, sign up for that email list. All right, let's kick into the show. Oscar Höglund, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ari, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I know you're in Sweden right now, and it's late there. And I know Epidemic Sound, you kind of started it there. But for those of you, I know that you're getting you touch so many aspects of the music industry, and so many people are familiar and have heard the music that has come from Epidemic Sound, but I don't think a lot of people actually know what Epidemic Sound is, even though you're valued at over $1 billion. I read that you had 2.5 billion times a day around the globe your music is heard or experienced. Which is quite a feat. That's like major label levels of just experience. But talk to me about what Epidemic Sound is and kind of how you arrived here where you're at.
Cool. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'd say Epidemic is like an overnight success that took 16 years to build. And so I think that we're maybe just a bit slower than most, right? But kidding aside, we've been around for a long period of time because we've been very diligent and tried to be methodical in terms of how we go about things. On the highest level of abstraction, Epidemic Sound is a company on a mission with one specific purpose, which is we want to try and see if we can help soundtrack the internet. That's why we get up in the morning. That's why we spent the last decade and a half trying to really perfect that, because we think that's important. We think that future generations may or may not look back on our generation and say, guys, inventing the internet was your biggest feat as a generation. That's once in a generation. And if that's the case, you need to ask yourself, how am I going to contribute? If that's going to be my generation's defining achievement, what's my role in that? And we kind of figure out earlier than most people that the internet ultimately was going to be what you and I are doing now. It's going to be video centric. It's all going to come down to video. We knew it was bound to start with text. And then after a while, we said, there's probably going to be pictures. But ultimately, it's all going to come down to video because humans prefer much more connecting and sharing information and emotion and entertainment through video. And so the bigger bet was, we think that the internet is going to be all about video. We want to be the company that soundtracks that. That's difficult. It involves music. It involves technology. It involves business innovation. It involves doing a lot of different things very, very differently. But at its core, that's what we're doing. We're trying to be the best soundtracking platform in the world for both artists and for visual content creators.
Great. And so just in practice, what does that mean?
Cool.
How does it work?
So Epidemic, I would argue, sits on 3 major breakthroughs or 3 components of value. So at the highest level, plain English, Epidemic is a service that you access online, or you use our mobile app, or you use our API. But you hit up epidemicsound.com if you're a content creator, anyone looking to make a video. This might be a YouTuber, a TikToker, an Instagrammer, it might be Netflix, production company, ad agency, but also Fortune 500 companies, mom and pop stores, or basically anyone wanting to tell a story. And you take out a subscription with us. And that subscription is super valuable because, dissimilar from basically all other services that provide music on the planet, you get access to our catalog of music, which is, if you ask me, sensational. Covers 250,000 pieces of IP, every genre that you want. But there's like a very particular component, which is all of our music has been curated and commissioned by ourselves. And we've not invited the traditional music industry to participate, in the sense that we don't work through PROs, we do it ourselves. We don't work through neighboring rights organizations, nor through record labels or publishers. Not because we take issue with them, but we just came to the conclusion that if we can be a one-stop shop, we can provide such an incredible service to our customers, because we can say, dissimilar from everyone else, we're a one-stop shop. You don't have to clear publishing separately, public performance, neighboring rights. As long as you pay the Epidemic subscription, everything is included.
Yeah.
And that was like a deal changer. So the first component was reinventing how we acquire music, and in that process, how we compensate artists. And then the second component that we built out over the ensuing decade was turning that into a software company, as in, what are the tools, what are the platforms, what are the recommendations, what's the data set, what are the AIs, how do you find music, how do you adopt it, how do you use it in your content, and then how do I distribute that across the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Spotifys, basically all the platforms around the world. So that's kind of how it started.
Right.
And I'll just pause there because there are so many more layers to it.
Right. So there's a lot there, and you touched on artist compensation, which I do want to get into. But just to clarify, to make sure I have this correct. So because there are so many creators, right there, everyone is a creator now with the smartphone and with TikTok and YouTube and all of that. So historically, we all remember kind of at the onset of YouTube where creators would upload videos that they would make at home and it'd slap a song on it. And then it wasn't monetized initially. Then the labels, the majors weren't thrilled with that because they weren't getting compensated for their music being used on these YouTube videos. So then initially the majors were like, take it all down. If we can't get paid, no one's going to be able to use this. Then they smartened up and they're like, well, all right, let's figure out a way to come together and monetize this. And so YouTube created Content ID. And so it enabled now this a payment structure in place. And so the majors were like, all right, well, if we can get paid, fine, just slap an ad on it. We'll make some money from it. And that's been worked out over the years. But now it's what you're saying is that creators can now come to pay a subscription, have access to your 250,000 songs, and use any of those songs without fear. And I guess I should say, the professional creators who are making revenue from this don't have to worry that a third party is going to come in and issue a copyright strike or take some of that revenue away because they have legally licensed the song from Epidemic. And it's cleared on YouTube, it's cleared on TikTok. No one's going to come after them, and they know that they can use that music royalty free, or at least in their mind, I should say. It's I don't know what the you define it as, like, the legal term, but they're going to be able to make money from it. And is that more or less correct? Is that how that works?
So I think that's a great summary, and it invites to a few clarifications. So let's get into it.
Okay.
So the first thing that I would define is, like, what did we do differently from a music perspective that allowed us to vastly simplify the life of video content creators?
Yeah.
Well, we took a contrarian opinion in terms of music and music ownership. So prior to Epidemic, 16 years ago, the way you should think about it, or the way I think about it, is that every single track on the planet Earth was represented by multiple stakeholders. And so think about it the following: like, there was an artist that played a role in putting this track to the world. And as a consequence, they didn't own that track, but they had a claim to, let's make up 16% of any future revenue generating from that track. It might be sync, it might be royalty, it might be licensing, like all of the above. Then there was a songwriter, and he or she had, let's say, 22% claim to any future revenue from that track. But then there was a studio musician, a producer, there was a record label, there was a publisher. And they all said that we want 7%, we want 22%, we want 9%. So everyone was making a claim in this track saying that we have some portion of the future value. Like, nobody knows what the value is, but whatever it is, we want our share.
Right.
Then in came the PROs, and they said, hey, we want to represent you guys to help you collect public performance. So we're going to take 7% off the top and then take 7% in fees. Then came the neighboring rights organization and said, hey, we want to help you as well. So we want to leverage on. And so it went. And so ultimately, you had all these people with the best of intentions. They all represented fractions. It's called fractional rights. And you try and tally up everything, and you would always come to the same outcome. So the tally would always be more than 100%, in that everyone tended to overstate their claim, right?
Sure.
So that was problematic. But it got even more complicated because then the next thing happened, which is they tended not to agree with each other. Like they were sort of, well, I've sang the song. Yeah, but I wrote the song. Yeah, but I recorded it. I paid for the recording. Yeah, I've sort of taken the songwriters through their dry spells and the good parts. Everyone felt undercompensated. So they would sort of fight internally. And then if anyone wanted to use that track and license it and sync it in a piece of content, whether it was a Super Bowl ad or a YouTube video or anything, the following had to take place. You had to negotiate individually with every single person who had a claim. Why? Well, because they all had a veto right, in that if everyone wasn't aboard, one person could say, you know what? I'm not happy. I'm going to declare my veto, and nobody can use this track. Right. And nobody would use that track because, like, per the US, there's statutory damages, right? So anyone who would go against that and infringe, you'd be liable to statutory damages, which is roughly $150,000 per infringement. That's the traditional model of music representation. So 16 years ago, along came Epidemic, like 5 founders, ambitious, some would say naive, and we said, okay, we want to do one thing better than everyone else. We want to help soundtrack the internet because it's all going to be video. Do we agree that fractional ownership isn't going to help us solve that? And we all said yes. Like, what would? And then we said, well, it depends. Like, what's in the best interest of the world's artists? What do they actually want? And so we dug in and we came up with 2 things, like first principle. And we said the first thing that we believe is like really, really important is distribution. If you are an artist and you have a voice, you have a specific point of view, you've created something, you want as many people as possible to hear your music. Like that's goal number 1. Okay, let's try and solve for that, we said. And then we said goal number 2 is we need to help them monetize because they need to make a living, right? And so these were the 2 things that we wanted to optimize for. And this is where we placed a huge contrarian bet that a lot of people thought was blasphemy, for lack of a better word. And we said, in order to help them distribute, in order to help them monetize, we're going to ask artists to sell us 100% of their rights. So we're only going to commission tracks, do complete buyouts. And when we do those buyouts, we can't have other people in that transaction because we want to own 100%. So PROs, NROs, like labels, publishers, we didn't work through those companies because we said, we'll build what they provide ourselves. It's more important that we have all the rights in one place so that we can own the entire track. Right. Now, initially, musicians asked us, like, why? Why is that important? Because everyone has taught me, like, the DNA from being a kid growing up making music was, if I own my rights, I can always make sure that I can monetize, distribute, like, that's my insurance. And we said, sure, that's the old world. And if you're happy with that, by all means, stay. Here's what we believe. We said that if you allow us to acquire 100% of the rights, we'll be in a unique position such that we can start to reach out to content creators, TikTokers, YouTubers, production companies, as it was in the early days. And we would say, hey, Ari, dissimilar from all other music in the world, we own 100% of our rights. As such, we can indemnify, we can warrant that if you pay the Epidemic Sound subscription, you can use our music in all of your content, in all of the commercial scenarios you can think of, now and in the future, across all platforms, in all jurisdictions. You don't have to pay to the PROs, they don't represent us. You don't have to pay to the record labels or the publishers, they don't represent us. We've done a full transaction, and that way, if you start using us, you are free to, there's no looking back. Yeah. And that was a game changer because that was like product market fit. So everyone started to sign up. Yeah. Okay. And that was really important because when we started to sign up, initially the broadcasters, production companies, the ad agencies, initially people thought that we were like cute because they thought that you're going to help serve music to media companies because they're the only companies that make content. We would bide our time and we say, for now, yes. But over time, we think that every single company on planet Earth is going to make video because everyone needs to create compelling content to attract talent, to keep their customers happy, to onboard their staff, to help people update their software, to promote their products. Like there's going to be content everywhere. So everyone is going to need this. But the beautiful thing was that we had this unique proposition because of the legal setup of our IP, such that people started to sign up in huge amounts. Like we got to a point where we were signing up thousands of customers per week. And these people were bringing in millions of viewers. So suddenly we got to the point where today, Epidemic 16 years in, like roughly 70% of all the world's most prolific storytellers, if it's Mr. Beast, if it's Netflix, if it's sort of content creators, multi-channel networks, they all have subscriptions with us because we provide so much value for them. So we got massive distribution.
Yeah. Okay. I know you're probably going to get to that second point of the artist compensation and monetizing this content, because what my initial gut reaction when you say you're simplifying or you're getting 100% ownership and you're kind of removing all of these organizations that have been set up to help pay artists. Like that is the reason for performing rights organizations, the reason for neighboring rights organizations, the reason for publishers, all of that is to help get artists and songwriters paid. So if you remove them, my initial gut reaction makes me think, well, artists are just going to be making a lot less now because of this, because now they don't have the ability to collect. You said you can't, they have to resign from their performing rights organization or they can't be part of the performing rights organization. Okay. Well, traditionally, if I got a sync on a big TV show, I would be getting paid. I still get paid. I still get checks from ASCAP, from my PRO, from syncs that I got 15 years ago. So like, where's that money now? Are you acting as another PRO, or does the deal with Epidemic, is that the trade-off that I just have to give up all future royalties if I'm going to work with Epidemic Sound, in the belief that what I'm going to get paid up front is going to make up for what the royalties I'm going to make on the back end? Or tell me how, artists can justify that.
Yeah. So super valid question and very to the point. I love it. Okay. So here's how we thought about it. Our goal was primarily to soundtrack, and still is, to soundtrack the internet. So that's where we put the majority of our efforts, the majority of our time. That's where we invested over the past years, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so the world we entered was the following. Like YouTube was early to the game and they established the creator economy. So a content creator can put out content, YouTube will find advertisers, and then they find a way to split the advertising revenue between YouTube and the content creator. Here's the kicker though. They don't allow for a three-way split, as in you can't divvy up the revenue between the music, the video creator, and the platform itself. It's a two-way split. And so content creators were faced with a problem. Like if I put music in my video, 100% of the revenue, like my entire livelihood, will disappear because the music IP owner, because they have no other recourse, no other way to monetize, will have to take all my revenue. I will be out of business. And so back in the early days, there was something called the value gap. They couldn't make it work. It was a very difficult equation to solve for. This is when Epidemic came in and we said, okay, so here's the thing. If you pay us a fixed subscription fee and you use our music, you are free to keep all of the revenue in relation to the video that you made because we're happy with the subscription. We're guaranteed payment. That way we could solve like a very big problem for the platforms out there, the YouTubes out there, for the content creators. And we could start to build like a premise or a promise for how artists could get paid. And so here's what we did in terms of compensation. How does that actually help artists? Well, we said the following. We said that we want to build a world where our compensation towards artists is not only fair, it never stops evolving, in the sense that we're going to constantly be adding new components or pillars, as we call them, to our compensation towards artists. So we currently hit 4 pillars. And let me break it down how we got there. So the first thing we did is we said that since we commission tracks, like we want to pay money upfront. We want to put our money where our mouth is because we're acquiring all the rights, and we acknowledge that on the off chance that this becomes a hit, like we're going to keep on receiving the subscription revenue and the artist initially isn't. So we need to do right by the artist. And so throughout the years, like the upfront payment that we provide when we commission a track has been constantly growing. Today it's anywhere between $2,000 to $8,000, which we pay upfront per track. It's not recoupable. It's not a loan. It never gets clawed back. If that track gets played 0 times, it's completely on us, and the artist keeps the $8,000. Before I go to the next pillar, it's interesting to just recognize the way that we acquire tracks is that we have tens and thousands of artists that reach out to Epidemic every single quarter because they really want to write for us. We accept 0.16%. You basically have to be a Grammy award-winning writer or music or artist today in order to surpass our quality bar, because that's the level we're at. And so what's interesting, the way we choose who we want to work with is through data, in the sense that you referenced 2.5 billion, and that was right for a couple of months ago. But today, our music gets played 3 billion times a day. Like that's the equivalent of 20 Super Bowls every single day, 365 days per year. And because it's music, it leaves a signal, it leaves a trace. And because we own all the IP and we're a software company, we collect all that signal. So we literally have a dashboard, a command center in Stockholm, Sweden, where we can see what the internet sounds like. We get 3 billion pieces of signal every day. So we see what tracks are being used on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, what's being added to Spotify, what's being skipped in playlists, what's being added, what's being liked, what are the comments on YouTube, who's downloading, what's the skip rate for different tracks. And so in real time, we can see what the world sounds like. We understand what's the demand and what's the supply. And every single day we ask ourselves the question, like, where is there insufficient music? What is the world looking more of? And that gives us signal how we commission tracks. Like we do an editorial selection as well, but we get all of that data. So that tells us this is what we should be commissioning. So that's pillar number 1. We get to pillar number 2, which is something we call a soundtrack bonus. So here's what we did. We said that how can we help artists be more interested in the art of soundtracking? Because in the early days, like they didn't care. Like, this is my song, take it or leave it, it's amazing. And we said, yes, Ari, it's a great song, but we're in the business of soundtracking. So your song needs to be super relevant. It needs to strike a chord with a content creator who wants to use that track to help tell their story. Like elevate an emotion, strike fear in the hearts of men, desire, like turn something into scary, turn something mundane into something epic. Because the way we think about it is video without music is like food without taste. It's like, it's dead calories. It's like human fuel. It's not memorable. It's not unforgettable. But if you add flavor, if you add umami, it becomes great. So we needed to find a way to sort of inspire and incentivize artists to really care about, I wonder why everyone loves my intros. Why does nobody love my drops? Like, what's wrong with my vocals? What do you mean I can't program drums? Because we had all that data. And so we created something which we call the soundtrack bonus, which is we set aside a part of our revenue, which is now several $1 million. And we created something called the soundtrack bonus, where we said that every year, every month, every week, like the proportion of tracks that get downloaded that come from you, Ari, let's say that you account for 5% of all the tracks that get downloaded from Epidemic, which would be an epic amount given the size of our library. But you would then receive 5% of our soundtrack bonus, which is several $1 million per year. Because we wanted to help you understand, we created a dashboard where you could see what tracks are being downloaded, what parts of my tracks are being used the most. People love my builds, but they hate my vocals. Okay, I'll try and redo them. What do you mean too much reverb, not enough? What do you mean my endings are too slow? Like, we would play back all that data such that artists became incentivized. So there was this soundtrack bonus based on if your music gets downloaded, you'll make even more money.
So that's kind of like the pro rata model in streaming services, where you make the percentage of the revenue that DSPs pay out based on the market share of streams that you've received? Is that similar? Is that how that works? And what's the percentage that you're paying out then of the
Loosely
subscription?
similar. So
Okay.
it's loosely similar. So it's a single percentage of our total revenue, but this is still just the second pillar.
Okay.
So this is where things get really interesting, right? So the third pillar is a kicker. So a few years ago, when we realized that our footprint in online video is huge, and all of our customers are telling us, like, guys, and these are content creators in general and YouTube creators in particular. So the Mr. Beast of the world are reaching out and saying, you know what our number one comment is on many of our videos? And we go, no. And they say, we love the music you guys are using. Mm-hmm. Like the music in all of your shows, your content, is so compelling. It's so good. We really want to listen to it on Spotify, YouTube Music, Deezer, Apple, take your pick. But we can't find it. And so content creators were reaching out, being super frustrated and saying, how can you help my listeners who enjoy my content fall in love with your music? They want to find your music. What's up? Mm-hmm. And so we took a step back and we said, okay, perhaps we've inadvertently created the world's most efficient launch platform for new artists and discovering music. Mm-hmm. Like we soundtrack content like no one else. What if we take all of our music across our entire catalog, and as soon as we publish it on Epidemic, as soon as we commission and we greenlight a new track, we'll parallel publish it across all other music streaming platforms in the world? Because we think that a proportion of all viewers are going to be encouraged to be listeners. We use Shazam, we use links, we use technology. We have a myriad of different ways to drive that. And we got to work. Initially, it was off to a slow start, and then it exploded. And so today, our music is played more than 20 billion times across DSPs around the world.
Right.
Now, we collect 100% of all the royalty that they generate. The master side, the publishing, the neighboring rights, everything. There's no middleman, so we get 100% of that revenue. Mm-hmm. And so here's where our third pillar came into play. We took a long, hard look at the traditional music industry, and we said, how much of all the royalty that accrues does typically get paid out to artists? And the answer was historically not that much. There were minimum guarantees, there were recoups, so there were some different setups. And so we took
those are from, that is, if you're looking at a traditional major label artist, that's true. But now we're not in that era where Spotify has said over half the money that it pay out goes to indie labels. Independent artists have about a 35% market share of the global revenue, and self-release DIY artists that release their music through a DIY distributor, like a DistroKid or Two Lost or something like that, they have now we have 6% of the market share, which so artists do get 100% of that. So yes, I do want to clarify, you're talking a historic model from 30 years ago, but it has shifted quite a bit. So, okay, but do continue.
Yes, definitely, right? And so here's how we reasoned. So we said the following, okay, so we've commissioned the track, we've paid for it up front, we own the rights, we've marketed to the world, but we think that if we are in true partnership with the artists that we work with, we want to share all of the royalty that we generate straight down the middle, like a 50-50 split.
Okay.
And we said we want to do it in perpetuity, such that if you stop working with us and you start doing other things, you join PROs or record labels or publishers, do other things, we're going to keep on paying that in perpetuity. One, because it's the right thing to do. And two, we think it's an incredible strong signal to show that we're very confident in our model. So we started doing that, and we started racking up tens of millions of dollars every single quarter. We started paying out 50-50 splits to all of our artists. And so suddenly word started to spread that, okay, if you start writing for Epidemic, you get guaranteed payments up front, you get free marketing across the world. Like people see your work, you get distribution, you get something called a soundtrack bonus, you get 50-50 splits in perpetuity. And then the final component is we said that as we look to our employees, over time, we encourage and we try and make them shareholders in Epidemic because they contribute to the long-term value of Epidemic. And we said, why wouldn't we do the exact same thing with artists? If you work with us for a specific set of time, we want to allow them to become shareholders such that we create long-term incentives. So to date, we've come up with 4 different pillars for compensation. So guaranteed upfront payments, soundtrack bonus, 50-50 splits, and then they become shareholders in Epidemic. Yeah. So on average, an average content creator at Epidemic makes between $60,000 to $80,000 per year. People who tend to make more, they make hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we don't have the extreme outliers like the tens of millions or the millions of dollars, but we're very happy in that we want to help create a sustainable, large group of super talented artists that get predictable revenue, that they are guaranteed for every track they put through, and marketing, and 50-50 splits.
And how many artists did you say you have working with Epidemic?
So it varies. I'd say that over the years, we've worked with tens of thousands of artists, right? Because some of them come and go, some of them stick around, they go out touring, and some have sustained for a very long period of time. In any given month, we commission and we release hundreds and hundreds of tracks. And so in any given month, we're working with hundreds, sometimes thousands of artists on a monthly basis. But they can vary in terms of who gets commission, who has time, who's touring, who's doing other things in parallel. Because a key component of how we work is it's non-exclusive. We don't believe in locking people in. Like we would, if it were up to us, we would love for artists to be part of other PROs, labels, and other things. But the devil's in the details, because if you look at the agreements you sign, if you want to join a PRO or something, you have to agree to everything I put out there has to be under your dominion. And that makes it impossible for us to acquire 100% of the rights because they no longer control all the rights. They've receded those rights. And so that's the only reason.
How many shareholder artists do you have?
I can get back with a specific number. I can give you the interval, but it's something that we've done over the years. So we have...
yeah. So, all right. So you've had tens of thousands of artists that you work with, hundreds, maybe thousands a month that are regularly releasing music with Epidemic Sound. You have a certain number of shareholders that have been with you long enough where they now are equity participants with Epidemic. But, I still am kind of getting back to like, yes, I will be the first to say that the traditional monetization model of the music industry is tremendously flawed. It was set up over 100 years ago, long before the internet. A lot of the publishing and songwriter royalty rates were based off of player pianos back in the day, and that's where we get the mechanical royalty rate. And all of this is tremendously flawed. There's no argument there. It's way too complicated. I appreciate that you have simplified this structure. My worry, I guess, is that as Epidemic starts to take up more and more market share of the recorded music industry, and like, yes, you started with sync, but you said you moved into streaming, and it's very clear what the footprint that Epidemic has now had in streaming when it comes to especially the lean back playlists. And I know that you said it was inspired initially by people on Mr. Beast's videos commenting, what song is this? And we're just going to put the song out there and they can go find the song. It's not as innocuous as that. It's not as innocent as that because Epidemic has now leaned in with DSPs, specifically Spotify, in getting kind of the front loaded on a lot of their lean back playlists, their functional music playlists. And Spotify will, of course, they have a lot of these like study or meditation or chill beats or lo-fi beats or whatever. We all know these tons of playlists. And oftentimes Epidemic has a large proportion of the songs in those playlists. And, there was a book that came out not too long ago by Liz Pelly, where she talks about, how a lot of these playlists used to be from self-releasing artists, and those artists kind of got removed, and now they've been flooded with Epidemic Sound artists and songs and recordings and stuff like that. But the trade-off is that Spotify will prioritize these your songs into these playlists, but the trade-off is they're going to pay you a lot less than the going royalty rate. And so now artists, especially self-releasing artists that aren't working with Epidemic, because you said that threshold is so high, no artist is going to be able to work with Epidemic. Fine. Appreciate you keep the quality up for your customers. But now all of us are having to compete with Epidemic with your massive catalog of, 250,000 songs, where you're like saying to Spotify, keep that royalty rate low for us, which then now hurts kind of the rest of the music industry and is making us kind of try to making us take lower and lower royalty rates, except we're not being prioritized like you are in the in these official Spotify editorial playlists, because you've now struck these direct deals, these licensing deals with the DSPs, where you will accept a lower royalty rate because they're going to juice up your plays. And so on a massive scale, this works beautifully for you because you're doing a big numbers game. But this is my concern for the rest of the music industry, especially independent artists who are not with Epidemic Sound, is now we are suffering the consequences of those actions because we are not being juiced up and prioritized because we don't want to accept a lower royalty rate from Spotify, but you're okay to do that. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I would love to.
Okay.
So there's a lot to unpack here. The way I think about it is the following. 7 years ago, I was asked to come talk at my youngest son's school. And the kids knew that I was into music. So everyone was anticipating that I would sort of go off and start saying, well, I work in music. Well, I didn't. My opening phrase was, hey, everyone, I'm Seth's dad. My name is Oscar. And I work with emotions. Like, that's what I do. Because we're in the soundtracking business. And ultimately, what soundtracking is and what music is in the soundtracking context is the voice of emotion. Like, we help create emotion. And over the years, we've become incredibly good at doing exactly that. Mm-hmm. And so we started to build a rapport, we build a knowledge, we build a great sense of pride in how do you characterize, how do you capture, how do you amplify emotion in visual content storytelling? And the answer is you do it by practicing. And so we put our heart and soul into doing that. And over time, like, we were really, really good at it. And the first foray into streaming was exactly how I attribute it. So it was driven by our content creators who said that everyone wants to listen to this content. There's huge demand. You should upload it to everywhere. And granted, the first stop was our friends at Spotify because their office is less than like a couple of miles from downtown Stockholm. Mm-hmm. And so we said, here's what we believe. So we uploaded it and sort of there was traction. There was something there. But over time, to your point, it evolved into something else. And the word I would use, I'm not sure what your word you use. I think you said conspicuous or something. I would say it's much more structured, because what happened in parallel is as the album construct in terms of consumption started to disappear and it shifted and moved much more into playlisting, like there was this pent-up demand in terms of people wanted music that was fit for purpose. And so as all platforms experimented, and Spotify, I think, definitely led that charge because they're ferocious learners. They were sort of ahead of the product game. They started to realize that people want music specifically for studying or for running or for working or for vacuum cleaning or for dog walking, for sleeping. Like, it turned out there were a ton of different circumstances where the feeling, the emotion, the overarching vibe was incredibly important, that it was consistent, that it was diverse enough to make it interesting, but still could appeal to a distinct group of listeners. And so we started to say that we're really good at this. And this is where I think that sort of people need to be either flexible. I'm not going to say honest. I'll just share my opinion. My opinion was when we moved into this space initially and we started doing this, we were shunned. We were ridiculed. People call us fake artists. They call us muzak. They call us like lesser tier artists, which was deeply insulting, not to me, because I'm a grown up, but sort of I would say to the incredible artists that we work with, because historically, like, that was frowned upon. Like, bar Brian Eno, this was a place where like you wouldn't put your music in background because it was called muzak.
Well, let
me truth, Ari, let me just finish it, because like the variety in these playlists initially when we started was minuscule. It was all like back catalog from traditional major labels. Like, nobody would write specifically. Nobody was to write towards understanding what were the different emotions, how was this evolving. And so I have friends in the gaming industry, and I think that this is like an apt analogy. Like, in the gaming industry for the longest time ever, like, everyone wanted to do shoot 'em up games. And if you weren't doing a shoot 'em up game, like kind of like Doom or sort of Final Fantasy game or something like that, basically you weren't respected. And then sort of suddenly somebody stumbled upon these casual games, which were more geared to women. There was virtual candy being made, and it was everything but the cool sort of kill 'em all games. And like a select group of companies like really said that we're going to take huge pride in doing this. The rest of the industry is saying that this is sort of less valuable. This is sort of not where the cool kids and the cool players should be. But we're going to take this with a huge amount of pride. And so that's exactly what we did. And so we lent in. And so for the first couple of years, like there was like zero respect. There was zero tolerance. But sort of, I think that entire part of the music industry now, I think the assumption is that it's something like 2% of the music industry, approaching 3, 4, and can probably grow to 5, 6. So there's like a huge demand. The amount of music now coming into all DSPs, not just Spotify, like we get a fraction of what we produce gets placed because there's fierce competition. We do not have like any special sort of treatment. Like there is a lot of incredible music constantly being pushed and pitched to these playlists. And to the best of my knowledge, you have to talk to DSPs. Like they live and die by if their customers are getting the right kind of music. So it's plays, it's likes, it's listen, it's skip rates. So that's the determinant. So these companies can't afford to have any other sort of prerequisite. I don't know the exact splits, but sort of I know that we get super fairly paid. I think we should get more. I think all music IP owners think that they should get more. But sort of we have like a very fair and a super transparent setup with all the different DSPs. So I'll pause there, but so that's how I see the space evolving.
I'm curious. I mean, was that part of the negotiations with your friends at Spotify down the road when you said we have all this great functional music, and they said, okay, this is the licensing rate, and can you speak to what that licensing royalty rate is? Because it is documented that it is well below the market rate. So I'm just curious, why did you license your catalog at such a lower rate than what the going rate for labels and distributors are with Spotify?
So our music is on, I think it's 41 or maybe 42 DSPs, of which Spotify is one. I think the rates that we have with all different DSPs varies. Some are higher, some are lower. I don't disclose exactly which one is where, but it's very much like a band with which in they all move. I think nowadays on all platforms, for me, I think that if I look at the marquee programs, if I look at sort of there are tons of different programs across all the different DSPs where there are different ways to promote sort of my music, your music, and other people's music. To my knowledge, that's a super fair, like transactional field, like willing buyer, willing seller. You can sort of get placements in different places. You can get recommendations. Ultimately, it's about music marketing. And so I'm very careful about speaking on other companies' behalf. I don't know what other people's bits are. I don't know what the setups are. But so I find that it's a super, like in general, competitive space. I think it's an area where like there's like general, if not price increasement. I think that the latest thing, if anything, is Spotify made alterations to their terms in terms of how many streams you need to get played, a certain length. There were these updates made which were across the board, and so I can't speak to anything preferential. Rather, it's a space that's constantly changing.
Well, I'm familiar with everything you're speaking about. You're talking about discovery mode, where artists give up 30% of the royalties, and they're going to get prioritized in these radio and other playlists. And you're speaking about the new policy last year where they implemented that songs that get less than 1,000 streams in a year aren't going to get paid. I'm asking more specifically the licensing rates that you struck with Spotify, and let's just speak to Spotify, not the other DSPs, because they're the biggest right now and they've been reported on the most. If it was in those initial conversations as saying, we're gonna give you this, you give us this. So it's essentially we're gonna put you in a lot of these playlists. We need to fill these playlists, and we're gonna pay you this, which is a lot less than what we're gonna pay other labels.
Yeah. So I want to unequivocally say there was nothing of that tit for tat. You do this, you get that. That just simply didn't happen.
So why did they prioritize your tracks? Because it is reported, and a lot of artists have shown their royalty statements that say when I get paid from Epidemic Sound, and I compare it, apples to apples here, the royalty rate is a lot less than if I were to just go straight from, through a DIY distributor, even understanding Epidemic's 50-50 split. So they have, and I know these rates aren't like public because I'm under NDAs and whatever, but artists have shown these rates. And so I'm just curious, why did Epidemic get prioritized in a lot of these lean back functional music playlists early on, and why did they replace all of the other artists and prioritize Epidemic songs in there initially? We're talking 5, 6, 7 years ago when you started, where you kind of took over the market, you took over that space.
So I think that there are two, maybe three things that come to mind. I'd say that the first thing that comes to mind is, I think that the reason we were successful in the beginning and still are is we took it incredibly seriously. As in, we have 600 employees, half of them are engineers. We work with thousands of artists. And dissimilar from many other companies, we said that we put a huge amount of pride in what we do. We're going to put out hundreds and hundreds of tracks per week. We're going to listen to everything. We're going to see how our music performs, what the comments are, how playlists change, how they're updated, what the new releases are. We're going to throw everything we have, and we're never going to apologize. We're never going to take a position that this is something that we're not proud of, that this is a lesser art form. On the contrary, we want to be best at this. And so I think by doing that over time, we earned a lot of following, a lot of understanding, a lot of knowledge, and we got to work with more and more artists, more and more talented, both songwriters, producers, and artists in themselves. And so we started to accumulate a lot of knowledge. Now, the second thing that I will say is, again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of anyone other than ourselves, but we did not take over, as in, we put out so much more music across all platforms than got placed. And in many cases, and it still is like a black box, we do not understand what gets picked or what doesn't. And so it's very much like a competitive field, whether it's Apple or Amazon, or if it's Spotify or any of the other bigger players. They do either algo or editorial or algotorial. Different platforms have different approaches. Some use machines, some use humans, some use a combination. Some have feeder playlists, bigger ones. I think it's very much a meritocracy, right? And so because there are so many different suppliers in there, I think that's what merits it. To your final point in terms of remuneration and compensation, you're right. We don't talk about that. Similar to people typically don't disclose their salaries. We don't talk about sort of private negotiations. But what I can talk to is, if you look at what we do structurally, when we strike deals with DSPs, we typically don't use PROs. We typically don't have majors or sub-publisher or distribution deals, because if you tally all of these up, there's 7% fees here, there's 6% there, there's loss of data here, there's 1 year delays in some payments, there's quarterly adjustments, there are transaction fees for switching US currency to European currency to Swedish and vice versa. There are so many steps, Ari. If you tally all of them up, I would not be surprised if that number is high double digits in terms of the total initial royalty payouts. The huge difference with Epidemic is that we provide the service of all of them within one entity, such that the efficiency gains are significant. So again, I can't speak to what everyone else makes, but I can speak to, if you compare, and I'm not privy to what you're talking to, but if you look at the amounts that people are making, it is significant. We are incredibly proud of the setup and how so much more is flowing back to artists. Yes, granted, not through the traditional outlets, but I want to make it super clear. I have no intention of casting any shame on anyone else in the industry, nor do I want a monopoly. On the contrary, when we launched Epidemic 16 years ago, we were deeply troubled, because it used to be the case that like the best of our generation, the coolest people we knew, they wanted to be artists. They wanted to express themselves. They wanted to be like on the barricades. But music back then was stricken by piracy. It was non-transparent. It didn't work. Like it didn't sit at top of the cultural pyramid. So our number one concern was like, how do we make artistry cool again? How do we make being music like something which is both sustainable but also aspirational? I look at where the world is now, and like part of me is happy, part of me is worried, because previously the number one desired a job, if you were growing up as a kid in the US for 50 years, has apparently been astronaut. And for the last 5 years, it's changed. Everyone wants to be an influencer. And I'm slightly undecided. On the one hand, I think it's great because if everyone has a voice and they want to influence and they want to participate in the world, that's great. But if all of that is just passing commentary on other people doing other stuff and you're not really applying yourself, then I'm deeply worried. Yeah. And so like we want to try and help usher in like the best version of the creative economy that we can.
Yeah, and those are all fair points. And I'm curious, you spoke to a bit ago when you said you first got into this, you got a lot of shade because people were calling you fake artists and stuff like that. But I do want to speak to that for a second, because where the fake artist label actually came from was not that it came because nobody cared who the label was, that it was Epidemic Sound or whatever. They didn't care about that. It was that, and which still exists, is that you go to the Spotify profile of the song that's getting millions of streams on the playlist, and you see that this artist doesn't exist. They're a fake artist. And everybody, Spotify argues, and you'll probably argue, well, those are real human beings behind it. It's not, it's like, but they're not, but there's no social presence. That name was made up yesterday. It's AI generated artwork. There's no bio, or maybe there's like an AI generated bio. So that's what they meant by fake artists. It was that it was clearly someone or an organization or multiple people, whatever, essentially trying to game the system and trick people essentially in that these are real artists, working artists, which they're not. It's like they're trying to, it's on the same platform as Beyonce, but they're not touring. They're not releasing albums. They're releasing singles. And it's to fill this very specific need, like you said. And the need was for these lean back functional music playlists that people wanted, listeners actually wanted. And so, it's the shade was because people felt duped. And it was the fake artist was because you look at hundreds, thousands of profiles now. They have a few songs. The name is made up. There's no bio. There's no social. They're not real working artists as we would understand what an artist is. And so, and I know, Epidemic saw that, and I believe that then you asked your artists or maybe required some of them to release this music that they were creating on their own profiles. So they're saying, nope, we want to get around this fake artist thing and put them on their own profiles. But then, because I know, like you said, you studied these playlists and you created music for it and you became really, really good at that. And that makes a lot of sense why you kind of took over there. But I'm curious if these artists then, if they're initially making music for Epidemic and the opportunities you're bringing them to be background and soundtrack soundtrack the brand, soundtrack the videos, and now soundtrack these playlists, but now they're having an identity crisis because they're like, well, I'm making this money. They're buying these songs outright. I don't really stand by the music under my artistic creative vision, but I still want the paycheck. But it doesn't feel right putting it on my own artist profile. I would really actually love to put it on a fake artist profile. And so that's where I guess, this creativity and this creative vision, this is where I see that some artists might struggle with that.
Yeah. So first off, I love the way how you're asking these questions. Like it's head on, which is amazing. Like, thank you so much. Now, let me tell you exactly how we got to where we are today, and then I'll let you or your listeners be the judge of whether your narrative or what I'm telling you is what resonates with them. Going back to the foundation of Epidemic, we said, like, specifically, we want to be the best soundtracking platform in the world. As such, we're looking for versatile artists, musicians, who are willing to take direction from us. We'll give you feedback, and we have a specific purpose. You need to be an amazing artist, But make no mistake, like this is in the service of emotion, and your music needs to be of such predisposition and quality such that it's syncable, such that people want to use it to tell a story, to emphasize something. And off we went. And we started to sign up tens of artists, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. The common denominator were that they tended to be multi-talented individuals who had a knack for taking direction. As to my point, here's the data. We need much more polka now, Ari. Now we need something which is Baido funk. Like this is like, we're doing an orchestral work. Didn't you used to play classical guitar, not just electric? And you said, hell yes. And so we would ask them, like, put out all these different kinds of music under different genres. And the more they put out, the more talented they become at adopting different genres. Eventually, we started to upload all of our music, as I said before, to all the different DSPs. And like we get to a point where our artists were telling us, not the other way around. Like, so guys, I come across as a schizophrenic. Like people think that I've had a stroke. I put a polka one day, and the next day I put out an R&B track. Then I go into like full on yodeling, and the next day I'm putting together a best of sound effects medley. Like I cannot put all of this under my name. I'm just like I'm like any actor, they would say. Like if I see Daniel Craig, he played Bond in one movie, but he played someone else in a different film, and he did someone else in a different film. Like I have different artistic expression. Like Pharrell puts some stuff out under Nerd, some under Pharrell. Like Taylor writes under a certain name, she performs under a second. Like we all know that Sting wasn't born Sting. Like Reginald Dwight is Elton John. Like there's a long tradition of having alternative names tied to different projects if the music merits it, because it's that different. Mm-hmm. And so they started asking us, like, we're going to put this out under different names because my listeners are kind of burning up. It doesn't make sense anymore. And we said, fine. Like, if you want to do that, we'll accommodate it. So the diamond drew out. There was a lot of this happening. Nobody was putting out social media because we were full, like, steam ahead on. We didn't have the traditional artist services. There was no media. Like, if you asked me, like the traditional music industry historically was more fake. Like you would engineer a group like Backstreet Boys or like something like people who didn't know each other. You would put them together. You would style them up. You would put them in context that wasn't really them. We did nothing of that. Like stay true to who you are. Make great music. So like the amount of music that came up got to a certain point where yes, like we felt that this is now, like, this is too much. Even though you're putting out a lot of music, what you're saying, Ari, is, I'm not saying it's not true, but the way we got there was not some, like, let's engineer and fool people. That's what I take issue with. We got to a point where, like, this is now at such a scale, like, we need to pull this back. We want to have fewer so people, like, you need to produce under definitely your own name. You can do one or two other things, but we need to bring it back because we've gotten to a scale where this isn't helping you. It isn't helping the listeners identify this is Nerd, this is Pharrell, this is something else. It was too much. And so that's how it went back. But there was nothing like dishonest, illegitimate. It wasn't construed on our end. We didn't push everything. This was follow the artist, follow their artistic direction, their desire to experiment and create a ton of different things. It got to a point where that needed to be pulled back and much more regulated across all platforms. So that's how we got to where we are today, which is a bit different from how you characterize it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But I'm assuming you get back to the original problem that the artist presented to you was I'm schizophrenic. And if I'm talented enough as a producer to create 17 different genres, all those genres won't fit on my artist profile. And so I'm not going to build a fan base. If you make me put polka and electronic on the same profile, that's not going to make any sense to this audience that I'm trying to build.
Yeah. And so the way we communicate, work, and interact with artists is like, it's super clear to us that every single time we work with an artist, it's always on their terms. As in, we reach out and say, hey, Ari, this is what we would love to produce. We think that you're the best suited person to do it. These are the 3 tracks in this month. that would generate $24,000. Like, would you be up for it? And then you say, yeah, I'm feeling these 2 tracks, but definitely not that third one. Like, I've just come back from Rio by the funk. Yeah, I'm totally down for that. But no, I don't want to do more yodeling. I hate that shit. I'm totally done with it. And so it's always the artist saying that, do I want to do this or not? So there's no coercion. There's no commitment. You have to do X. You have to do Y. Artists they can leave like at their own accord at any time. Like, we have less than 1 month just so we can pay out the last of money that we're due. The royalties keep on paying sort of in perpetuity, right? And so it's always very much on the premise of the artist. And so like it's always down to them. So they determine what kind of music do I want to put out, to what extent, what part of my catalog do I want to do. A lot of the times they say no, like, I'm not feeling it. I'm writing something else now. I'm doing a collab with someone else. Or I mean, the last example is I have so many different examples. So last week, like, something that really popped up, that blew up with it, which is an example of somebody who's been like just pursuing like one specific kind of music. So the big talk of the town last week in YouTube world was this OG YouTube channel called Outdoor Boys. And they've been around for 11 years. They put out more than 1,000 videos. And last week, the guy who's the original creator decided to call it quits. He's like, it's been an incredible ride. His channel has exploded. Like, he has 16 million followers now, 15.2 or something. And he got to a point where he said, it's too much. Like, I get so much attention. There are so many fans, people reaching out to me, my wife, my kids. Like, I've loved this journey, but I'm going to call it quits. And so he put out this farewell video. It's called Outdoor Boys. Go and have a look at it. And it went absolutely viral. And so it's amassed, I think, 16 million views in the last 4 to 5 days. And the final track that he uses to sync his entire memory, where he sort of puts together this incredible piece of content, like 11 years in the making, is an Epidemic artist, because Outdoor Boys have been customers of ours for many years. And this guy called Matthias Tell. Incredible singer-songwriter who's like has a very distinct sound. And they use one of his tracks, and it immediately goes viral. And so you can pull it up if you want to, or we can put the links so people can go have a look.
Yep.
And so what happens is, in less than 42 hours, he gets almost 50,000 Shazams. His Instagram gets 1 million hits within the first week. His Spotify streams grow not 600, but 6,000%. Like, he's off the charts on Apple. So if he starts climbing charts, he starts being added all over the place. Like, the Epidemic effect is like super beneficial for artists. So we want to provide different ways. So some people, like, they want to do one kind of music, one craft, and it's 100% their prerogative. Matthias Tell is a great example of that. Some people have more of a versatile approach. They don't want to tour. They don't want us to do something specific. They want to do different versions. And so that's what they do. We try to be very clear in terms of, it's your prerogative. Like, we want to be an enabler. We don't tell people exactly. We don't commission that way. Mm-hmm. We're saying this is an option that you have.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes perfect sense. Where do you go from here? I know that you recently acquired Song Sleuth, which helps kind of track down royalties and just like make sense of how remixes are used and different samples and stuff like that, cover recordings, live recordings like that. I mean, AI is kind of everyone is wondering what's going to happen with AI music moving forward. Are you planning to integrate, I guess, generative AI music in terms of your process?
So the 2 things that I'm most excited about, which we have just around the corner, are things where we think that we're 16 years young. And for the first couple of years, I would say that we were a feature, in the sense that we were close to a one-trick pony. Like, if you can evolve from a feature, you become a product. And so a product is a must-have. And so over the last 10 years, I think it's fair to say that we evolved to a product. We have an incredible roster of artists. We've built out a reputation. We've built out infrastructure. We've built out software. We have plugins. We have toolings. Like, we've provided the sort of the perfect platform if you want a soundtrack. If you're an artist or if you are a storyteller and you want to meet, we believe that we built sort of the best product and the best infrastructure for that to sort of materialize. So where do you go from there? Well, the next step after feature, after product, is if you can become a platform. If you can become a platform, you're more resilient, you can make a bigger dent in the universe, you can help solve more and bigger problems for more people. And so we're now trying to embark on how do we become a platform? And we think that there are two important ways of doing that. So the first thing that we're doing is from a pure technical perspective. And so no other comparison, because Amazon is a juggernaut of a company, but many years ago, they decided internally, we need to really invest in creating the internal infrastructure such that we can scale our business, grow the size, grow the compute, grow the logistics, grow the infrastructure of the business. And so they started to deploy people and passion and content and software and data and then AI and all of the above. And they built this incredible infrastructure that helped them scale. Somebody at some point, I think, said that, wait a second, why do we only run this as an internal tool? I think that this is the best scaling tool in the market. Let's open this up for the wider ecosystem and turn this into an external product. So they opened the kimono, outcome came AWS, and the rest is history. Like, cloud storage sort of really took off, and sort of Google followed, Azure, and they built that industry. I think that's where the comparison ends. But our version of that is that for the last 16 years, we said that dissimilar from everyone else. We don't want to go into pictures or editing or color grading. We only want to work with audio. And we want to try and become the most sophisticated company on the planet in terms of understanding, how does audio fit in the creator economy? How does it help augment stories in video and DSPs? And what's the connection? What's the data? What's the tooling? What's the software? How do you monetize it? How do you distribute? How do you make sure that people don't pirate your content, but still you want to spread it? How do you get distribution without forsaking monetization? Like, all of that. And for 16 years, we built the most sophisticated infrastructure there is on the planet. And 3 weeks ago, we said that, why do we only use this for our own IP? Why can't we open this up such that everyone who's an artist, everyone who has IP or content or songs can reap the benefits of what we built? So 2 weeks ago, we opened what we're calling Antidote. So yes, it's a pun, Epidemic, but we want to help be the cure for music marketing and for artists. We don't just want to help ourselves. We want to help other artists that you were referencing before, Ari. How do we unlock YouTube, TikTok, other platforms? What's the data you need to have in place? What are the tools? How does Content ID work? How do you man these different CMSs? How do you make sure that you release claims? What if your money ends up in escrow? How do you collect that? How do you make sure that there aren't 5 different people along the way who levy a tax and take money before they pay what's owed to you directly to you? How do these tracks get found by Shazam? How do they end up on playlists? How do you make sure that they get published across all DSPs, not just some DSPs? So we're opening up that entire platform, and we're saying so we can help more than just ourselves. So initially now we started to go after and identify people who have IP where we really think that we can showcase this is what we're doing. Because it's not lost on us that for the first 10 years we didn't do interviews. And now, yes, some people know us, but it's been in the context of some of the authors and people and the context that you mentioned before. So we want to really showcase that this is what we built, this is the tool we have. The way we think that we should price this is that we're not going to charge for anything unless we create value. So you have the baseline of your tracks and sort of how they work and how they perform. Allow us to try and help you. If we can't create any marginal upside, it's free, because then obviously we're of no value to you. But if we can create value, we'll come up with a smart way, what seems fair. First you capture the value, and then we see how we share that between us. And so this is something that we're rolling out, and we're very, very bullish, because we think that this is ultimately what all the platforms want. Help with connecting more people, getting them online. This is what artists want. This is what labels want. This is what publishers want. The content creators want access to more music, more variety, much more content out there. So we want to help basically challenge ourselves, as in help sort of platform others and basically let the best content win. So that's like our technical play. It's called Antidote. It's currently invite only. So that's something that people can reach out. And the second one is, dare I say, like even more innovative, and it's actually being launched tomorrow. And so this is kind of like an exclusive. And so this more takes a cultural approach. And so here's our thinking. Or here's my thinking. And then the companies have taken this idea and made it infinitely better. So I feel that as I look to the music industry over the last couple of years, I think that artists, traditional music artists, have created a lot of value. But I would argue that there's an infrastructure that helps serve them, because they get royalties, they have record labels, they can go touring. There are clear rules of engagement that can work in your benefit. So I think that they're well served. They're struggling, but they're well served. I then look at the traditional infrastructure, so the record label, the publishers, the majors, and I too think that they are well served because they're well positioned. They have a market share, sometimes minimum guarantees. There's royalty rates. It's like a level playing field, and I think that they're well served. I will make the argument that I think that the people who've made the most interesting content for the last 5 to 10 years have been structurally disadvantaged. And the ones I'm talking about are the producers, the remixers, and the DJs. I'm thinking about the Fred Agains, the Swedish House Mafias, like the Calvin Harrises, the Martin Garrix, like the Rebecca Fionas, like the people who take other people's IP, apply their incredible talent, remix other IP, and take one and one and turn it into three. The reason why I think that they've been like between a rock and a hard place is the following. Typically, when they get a commission from a label, it's a last minute thing. They're asked to do a remix of a track that they have no particular affinity for. It's more of a gig. And more often than not, because we've interviewed a huge proportion of these super talented individuals, they don't get paid that well. And the counter argument they typically get is, well, you're going to be remixing this artist, and he or she is culturally much more renowned than you are. So the mere association is going to be worth so much for you that I'm only going to pay you like $1,000 or something. And so instead you do that because you know, and so too does the industry, that if you are a DJ or a producer, as long as you have the hit of the summer, as long as there's a huge amount of appeal for your remix, you will get the call. And the call is somebody who offers you residency. It might be Ishkaya in Ibiza, it might be The Win in Las Vegas, it might be Heat, it might be Coachella, somewhere where you know you can charge or you're going to get paid like $250,000, $500,000 per set. That's how you make your money. Because most often, even if you do a super compelling remix, you will get no percentage points. On average, you typically don't, because between the label, the artist, the publisher, the songwriters, if you do a pure remix, you don't really get a meaningful percentage of the royalty downstream, because you're basically just working on top of somebody else's IP. So here's our thinking. We've said the following. One dramatic way of thinking about Epidemic Sound is that we have 250,000 pieces of IP. We have vocal tracks, instrumental tracks, sound bed, and sound effects. We have the provenance of every single sample. Everything has been sort of tailor-made. It's split into stems. So we basically have the most comprehensive sample pack in the entire universe. And so what we've done now recently is, over the last 6 months, we've reached out to 10 of the most prolific producers and DJs on the planet. And we said the following. I'm going to use you as an example, Ari. So, hey, Ari, we're Epidemic. You might have heard of us. We would love to commission a remix. And we'll gladly pay you 6 figures, 5 or 6 figures to do the remix. And you go, wow, I normally get like $1,000 because I'm told that the cultural association is worth a lot. And we're like, yeah, we know. We have a different opinion. Like, we really value what you bring to the table. So we'll pay you like a huge upfront fee. Not recoupable. It's not a loan. We'll pay you for your time. And then you typically go, okay, do I have to choose a specific track? And we go, no. You can choose whatever tickles your fancy in our 250,000 pieces of IP. Like, as long as you use the IP within our catalog, all of that is cleared. All of that can be sampled. There are no restrictions. There's no limitations. You can be as creative as you like. The artist immediately goes like, that's crazy cool. Like, I'm in. And we go, no, wait a second. So if you make this track, we're going to put it front and center on Epidemic, and then we're going to market it to like millions of content creators. And we know you're amazing. We know that their demand is amazing, that they're asking for your kind of music. That's why we're having this discussion. So we're going to market that to millions of content creators. And with a very high likelihood, in a few weeks, you're going to have hundreds of millions of people all around the world consuming your track through the content of the storytellers that they love the most on this planet. And everyone has said, right, that's incredible, because you're basically giving me free marketing. Like, that's dramatically increasing the likelihood of me having the hit of the summer and such that I get residency. That's crazy cool. Should we get to work? And we say, no, we're not going to get to work, because we're going to parallel publish all of that music across all the DSPs. And yes, so Spotify is one of them, because we've spoken about them at length, but so too is Apple, so too is Amazon, like YouTube Music, all of the above. And we're going to collect all the royalty which is associated, because we're restriction free, we're not royalty free. So all the master, all the publishing and everything. And we're going to split that with you in perpetuity. So you're going to get a share, the artist that you choose is going to get a share, and we're going to get a share. So suddenly you have passive revenue flowing through like the rest of your career. You get marketing, you get paid up front. We think that this is going to be a complete game changer for producers, remixers, DJs. We think that this might be a smart way to help solve the music marketing problem of today. And we think that sort of the first artist we're going to launch with is Honey Dijon. She goes live tomorrow. And sort of this is something that's going to mark the start of this. So every single month, we're going to release a new remix. And then we have at least 2 additional ideas in store for what we think, how this scales and what might be next. So I'll stop there. But these are the
Very
2 things.
cool. Yeah,
Really
no, that's fascinating. So I mean, you're essentially acting kind of as a label, and this more or less the A&R department that's putting these artists together to collaborate, but the collaboration is really just that producer that's kind of using one of your other artists' tracks to sample and creating a new remix from it. So yeah,
I think you're absolutely. We're basically becoming a label, but we're also a publisher, because we look after the songwriters.
Right.
We're also a PRO, like we're also a marketing department. We're trying to be a full stack, like a one-stop shop, offering up all the things that we think are valuable and needed and difficult to solve for in the current music world.
So these artists, these headline artists that you're doing these deals with, like Honey Dijon, are they required to, I mean, can they still work with their PRO, or how does that work in your value proposition?
Yeah. So, I mean, we can break out the specifics, but so the short answer is yes, because they're doing remixes, they're not creating new IP. Instead, they're using IP that already exists. The short answer is yes.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, Oscar, I've taken up enough of your time. I appreciate you sticking with me and answering all of my questions. I longtime listeners know I don't throw softballs at people. I don't care who you are. So you're one of 200 guests that we've had conversations where I appreciate that you've been so transparent, that you've hung with me this whole time as I tossed you the questions that we all want to know, and that oftentimes people that just don't get a chance to ask these questions, and then the rumor mill starts, and then people make their own opinions. So I appreciate that you were able to come on and clear a lot of this up, and really pull back the curtain on everything that Epidemic does, because like you said, you didn't do a lot of interviews early on, and it's people have known Epidemic and they've talked about it a lot. Obviously it's been admired for everything that you've done in the space. So I appreciate that you were able to be as open and clear and fielded all of my questions that I flung your way. I have one final question.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and sort of it's on us. Based in Sweden, we've kept to ourselves. That's going to change now. Our ambition is to be sort of much more vocal, and so we're sort of open for questions, open for business.
I appreciate that. I'm sure everyone appreciates that. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Ooh, what does it mean to make it? So I referenced Matthias Tell, and so he exploded 72 hours ago 48 hours ago, we had our spring party, so our company party in Stockholm, where we flew everyone in from around the world. Like the secret guest that we didn't mention for anyone was, and in the middle of that chaos, we flew in Matthias. And so we had him perform live on stage in front of the entire company. Listening to him, seeing him perform, like getting the chance to provide like a platform for true talent, like true musical talent, and just seeing people react, congregate, come together, be touched by what he put out there. That was an emotional moment for me. That feels like making it. That feels like we're making the world a more beautiful, a more connected, a more interesting place. That's what I think it is to make it.
Oscar, thank you so much. It's great.
Thanks, Ari.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.